Day 103, April 13th, The Love of Falsehood, Jeremiah 5 verse 31. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests bear rule by their means, and my people love to have it so, and what will ye do in the end thereof? Jeremiah 5 verse 31. Once again, we find ourselves meditating on the words of the Lord spoken through the prophet Jeremiah to backslidden Israel. From the 2nd to the 5th chapter, the Lord continues to make his case against Israel and warns them of impending judgment. Throughout these chapters, God's indictments against Israel centered around their worship of false gods. They had gone far from the Lord and, walking after vanity, became vain, Jeremiah 2 verse 5. They had defiled the land of their inheritance with their sins, making it an abomination to God, Jeremiah 2:7, 3:2. The priests failed to seek the Lord, and those who handled the law didn't know God, Jeremiah 2 verse 8. The pastors transgressed and the prophets prophesied by Baal, Jeremiah 2 verse 8. The people changed their glory, the God of Israel, for empty pursuits, Jeremiah 2 verse 11. In doing so, they forsook their source of grace, trading it for useless false religion, Jeremiah 2 verse 13. They broke their own commitment to the Lord, Jeremiah 2 verse 20, and even forgot him, Jeremiah 2 verse 32. If there was evil that could be done, they were sure to do it, Jeremiah 3 verse 5. Worst of all, after doing all of this, they refused to be ashamed, Jeremiah 3 verse 3. But even in spite of their wickedness, we can see the mercy of God woven throughout these chapters, for he repeatedly pleads with them to return unto him. Return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Lord, and I will not cause mine anger to fall upon you, for I am merciful, saith the Lord, and I will not keep anger forever. Only acknowledge thine iniquity, that thou hast transgressed against the Lord thy God, and hast scattered thy ways to the strangers under every green tree, and ye have not obeyed my voice, saith the Lord. Jeremiah 3 verses 12-13. Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you, and I will take you one of a city, and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion, and I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. Jeremiah 3 verses 14-15. Return, ye backsliding children, and I will heal your backslidings. Jeremiah 3 verse 22. If thou wilt return, O Israel, saith the Lord, return unto me, and if thou wilt put away thine abominations out of my sight, then shalt thou not remove. Jeremiah 4 verse 1. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord, and take away the foreskins of your heart, ye men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my fury come forth like fire, and burn that none can quench it, because of the evil of your doings. Jeremiah 4 verse 4. O Jerusalem, wash thine heart from wickedness, that thou mayest be saved. How long shall thy vain thoughts lodge within thee? Jeremiah 4 verse 14. What mercy and grace the Lord showed Israel even as they hardened their hearts against him. When we meditate on divine appeals such as these, we cannot help but be amazed at the tender love which he showed in his dealings with Israel. We can see that the Lord had no desire for Israel to suffer, but that he was forced to chasten his people because of their rebellion. The Israelites were so hardened in their sins that they would not repent even when the Lord had attempted to discipline them more lightly. O Lord, are not thine eyes upon the truth? Thou hast stricken them, but they have not grieved, thou hast consumed them, but they have refused to receive correction, they have made their faces harder than a rock, they have refused to return. Jeremiah 5 verse 3. It was at this point that the Lord was forced to take more severe action against his people. They had come to the place where they were willing even to suffer affliction to keep their sins. And with that said, it must be noted that many people are exactly the same way in our day. They become so enamored with their sins that they will even cling unto them to their own hurt. Though their sins are destroying them, they determine to continue in the practice of them. Oh, what a brutal master sin is! And what fools we are when we serve it! Just as we observed in yesterday's meditation, Israel's backslidings were a consequence of their pride. The Lord had blessed them above all nations, and upon being lifted up in their hearts, they departed from the God who had blessed them. This is alluded to again in the 5th chapter. How shall I pardon thee for this? Thy children have forsaken me, and sworn by them that are no gods. When I had fed them to the full, they then committed adultery, and assembled themselves by troops in the harlots' houses. They were as fed horses in the morning, every one neighed after his neighbor's wife. Jeremiah 5 verses 7-8. We must always be careful during those times when we are abounding with grace, for our next step could be our fall from it. While it certainly is God's will for us to walk in the fullness of grace and blessing, we must understand our own tendency to become proud and complacent. All too often, when we feel as if all is going well, we let go of the caution we had, and we cease from the spiritual disciplines which were a means of grace. Countless men, many of which who served in positions of spiritual leadership, have found themselves in the snare of Satan, having been taken in the time of their complacency. We need not mention any names to remind ourselves that men much stronger than ourselves have fallen. Therefore, it is in our best interest to watch over our own spiritual practices, taking note of any slight changes which might warn us that we have regressed. In the case of Israel, the nation had drifted away from God so far that they had no desire to return to Him. Though He chastened them, their love of idolatry kept them away. In fact, when He did discipline them, they deceived themselves, wanting to believe that their troubles were not caused by the God they had forsaken. They have belied the Lord, and said, "It is not He, neither shall evil come upon us, neither shall we see sword nor famine." Jeremiah 5 verse 12. Backslidden Christians are highly susceptible to self-deception. At first, as they begin to cease from their regular spiritual practices, they excuse themselves. Rather than realizing the danger of their departure, they rationalize, telling themselves that they either have good cause or good excuses for their apathy. The Christian who skips church on Sunday might be perfectly able to attend, but they convince themselves that other priorities are more important. Likewise, one who normally spends time reading the scriptures in the morning might cease from doing so. While the truth is that they are still able to continue their reading, they excuse themselves by claiming that they have too many other things to do. It is all too easy for a Christian who was passionate about spending time in the Word to eventually lose all desire for it. Upon being converted, they may have been spending hours reading it each day, but only a few years or even months later, they are back in front of the television, and, not long after this, we may find that they have become utterly corrupted by worldliness and sin. The further a person backslides, the more lies that have ensnared them. Sadly, there are many people who used to attend church, but who, after backsliding into sin and worldliness, begin to blame others who did them no wrong. While the reason for their departure was purely their own sin, they justify themselves by slandering others. If they are even more hardened in their rebellion, they might even cast blame at God. With these things in mind, we must always remind ourselves that drifting away from God can happen to any of us very easily. That is why it is essential for us to continually watch against even the slightest hint of sin and complacency. Now, returning to the subject of self-deception, the Israel as a backslidden nation behaved in a similar way to a backslidden individual, for they began to trust in lies and to justify their sins. This is where our verse comes into play. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests bear rule by their means, and my people love to have it so, and what will ye do in the end thereof? Jeremiah 5 verse 31. As the affections of a backslider turn away to sin, they begin to develop affection for the lies which they have used to justify their rebellion. Thus, in Israel, false prophets were in and true prophets were out. We might have supposed that the Israelites were the unfortunate victims of deception, but as we study the writings of the prophets, we find that they desired to be deceived. Now go, write it before them in a table, and note it in a book, that it may be for the time to come forever and ever, that this is a rebellious people, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord, which say to the seers, See not, and to the prophets, Prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. Isaiah 30 verses 8-10. The bottom line is that the backslider hears what they want to hear and believes what they want to believe. They are not a victim of their deception, but a willing participant. As their love for the Lord turns to coldness, their love for lies grows stronger. And so, we who love the Lord must cling to Christ, fearing even the thought of drifting away from Him. We must take heed to ourselves, guarding our hearts against sin and complacency. A true love for God must be continually nurtured and tended to with the utmost diligence and care, lest our tender love for God be stolen away by the self-deceptions of the flesh.